alaikum, viewers. Welcome back to another episode of Agahi with your host, Warisa Zainab. In today's episode, we have David Klaasen, who is a facilitator, trainer, coach, and he'll tell more about himself. And today we will be talking about brain chemistry and how it impacts your behavior. So let's dive into the topic. Welcome to the show, David, once again.
Thank you very much indeed. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I really love talking about this subject. So thank you for inviting me onto the show.
Absolute honor to have you again. So David, tell us about the work that you do.
Well, it's a lot to do with behavior change in business. I focus mainly on helping businesses so that leaders can learn the best behaviors in order to lead their people, but also that managers learn the best behaviors to be able to manage and get, the most from their people by working well together with them. And that individual team members can also understand their own behavior and do what is required to be successful, so that there's success throughout. At an individual level, people feel successful in what they're doing in their work. The teams are successful so that the business is successful. And it really goes up and down like that, so that we help leaders to say, you need to be really clear and inspire your people so they have good brain chemistry, which then motivates them and gives them good behavior. And everyone needs to be self-aware. So leaders need to be self-aware, managers need to be self-aware, and we, including all your viewers, also need to be self-aware about how our brain works and what affects our behavior and our motivation.
When you talk about behavior, what is behavior? How would you define that?
It's the stuff that we do, right? It's the stuff that we see. It's the action that I see you take. For example, you contacted me on LinkedIn, and we had a couple of chats, and then we agreed on stuff, and you always follow up very promptly. You're easy to communicate with. So I see your behavior as being someone who's very professional and very easy to get on with. And that motivates me to want to speak with you and come on your show.
And that is amazing. You spoke about what behavior is all about, but behavior is definitely guided by our thought process, by our cognitions. So talk to us about brain chemistry. What does brain and how does brain play an important role in our behavior?
Right, it's really quite fascinating. So for the last couple of 100 years or so, the only thing we knew about the brain was from dead brains that people no longer alive, scientists would cut them up, they'd look at brain cells. And it's really only in the last 20, 30 years that we've got machinery and equipment that will allow us to scan what's happening inside our brain while we're still alive, i.e. while we're thinking. And that means that they're able to discover a whole new realm of understanding about human behavior and the way that things are triggered in our brain and how then that relates to our behavior in real life situations. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense. It does. But 100 years back, I'm sure the science wasn't as advanced, technology wasn't as advanced as it is today.
Correct.
And people's perceptions and attitudes were way different than what it is today. And with all the scientific studies and researches that have happened recently, we have learned so much more. So tell us about that, David.
Well, it really is. It's a very evolving subject, so that a lot of the studies that are done where they will maybe do a study, for example, Dr. Carol Dweck did a number of studies with school children, the way that they were given feedback, so that certain school children, in a very well-known bit of research that she did, they took the children, they split them into two different groups, and one group of children was taught, given a test, medium level test, and one group, they split them up, and then one group was said, oh, you did really well, you must be really smart. And to the other group, they said, oh, you did really well, you must have put in a lot of effort. So the feedback was different for different groups. They did a number of different sequences, I'm not going to go into all the details now, of these with these children, gave them different tests. And what they found was that the children who'd been told they were smart began to believe and think, well, you're either smart or not smart. I don't have control over that. I did well in that test and I'm liked and admired because I'm smart. Great. But if I go into a challenge and it's something is difficult, I may no longer be smart. So sometimes it's better to play safe and not try difficult things. Where the children who are told you put in a lot of effort, would try a lot of difficult things because they just said, well, I'm just going to put in more effort and maybe I'll do well. And if not, I'll just have put in my effort and I'll get acknowledged for my effort. And she then coined the phrase mindset, and how we can have a fixed mindset by being very judgmental and deterministic about the way we see the world, i.e. I'm smart or not smart, or have a growth mindset where we think more about being able to learn and grow and evolve, even if it feels uncomfortable. So here's an interesting thing around this. A lot of people stop learning when they're older. They leave school and then they stop learning because learning is difficult. It makes us feel uncomfortable. You have to be able to be okay with being incompetent. And a lot of adults don't like that feeling. Makes them feel stupid, makes them feel lower in status. And therefore they avoid it and go, no, I'm okay. I don't need to know this. I don't need to learn that. Does that make sense?
Because learning is all about growth and development and coming out of your comfort zone.
Right. But that is uncomfortable. The very nature of our comfort zone keeps us comfortable. If we step outside it, we feel uncomfortable. And this is where brain chemistry becomes really interesting. Because when we step out of our comfort zone, our brain goes, uh-oh, danger. And that can create a chemical that makes us feel at first alert. Okay, what's going on? I'm a bit uncomfortable here. I need to be alert. But if that continues and doesn't get moderated, we become anxious. And when we become anxious, that's when things get a bit messy in our brain. So what happens is that the chemicals help our brain cells to talk to one another. And there's a number of different chemicals, and it's fun to talk a bit about them. And one of them it's called noradrenaline, or most viewers may be familiar with the term adrenaline.
Yes.
Which is also a hormone that goes into our blood and sparks off a number of different things. But what it does to our brain, what the scientists now have discovered, is that it makes us very tunnel vision. So we only see a very narrow, small area. We don't see the bigger picture.
Yes.
And we begin to get very pessimistic. So we think that things are going wrong and will probably go wrong. And we also make accidental connections in our brain. So when I first started doing Zoom and training online in the beginning of the lockdowns, a number of people wouldn't have their video on, or I wouldn't be able to see them clearly, and I wouldn't get much feedback because it was still a new format for a lot of people. And it was really interesting because I began to get a bit nervous about that. Oh, I don't see people. Maybe they're not interested. Maybe they're not even listening. But if I allowed that thought to run riot, I begin to maybe stumble and stutter and look at my notes or not feel comfortable training. Where now I just need to be able to go, well, some people will listen, some people won't. That I'm going to be here for the people who are engaged. So I don't let it stress me out. But I've seen a lot of people get very stressed. And you can see this in public speakers as well. Sometimes someone who's having to speak in public for the first time, they get very stressed, they lose their way, they fumble their words, it all spirals out of control really quickly. And in fact, most people who go into a situation where they have to speak in public, their brain chemicals are making, I might look stupid, I might forget my lines, and that creates havoc in their brain so they can't perform well. So it's really important to be aware and conscious of when you're getting triggered and what to do about that. And there's a couple of things that you can do to calm yourself down, because adrenaline actually gets metabolized in the body under normal circumstances. You get a little boost of adrenaline, you feel a little surge of fear or anger or whatever. It can usually be absorbed by the body in about 7 to 10 seconds. If you catch it early enough, right? And a way then to manage it is to take a couple of deep breaths. Now, some of your viewers might be familiar with this. You're probably familiar with it yourself, but just relax. It's just like, take a deep breath, especially relaxing on the out breath so you don't hyperventilate. By the time you've done 2 or 3 of those and your body feels safe again, it doesn't feel threatened like it's going to die, then you get your resourcefulness back. You can begin to go, okay, what's really going on here? My mind is being pessimistic, but what do I really need to focus on here in order to stay optimistic and focus on what I'm trying to achieve, be it this interview or the public speaking I'm doing or the task I'm doing.
And I think this is the advice given by most mental health professionals as well. When people experience anxiety, panic attack, or hyperventilation, is just to take a step back, focus on your breathing, and try to relax your body. And that will have a relaxating effect on your mind.
Absolutely. And the interesting thing about it is to try, if you're suffering from anxiety of any sort, trying to do something from inside your brain is not going to help, because your brain is not really functioning properly, because it's got this little cocktail of neurochemicals going on inside that's making it in a way like malfunction a little bit, because it's scared, right? It's getting a bit upset. It thinks it's under threat, and it's beginning to imagine lots of things going wrong, which could make other things go wrong. So as you say, by saying, like, I'm not going to think about anything here at the moment, I'm going to focus on my body, my breathing. It's the easiest thing to focus on, because we tend to breathe unconsciously. And when we breathe consciously and feel the air go in our lungs or into our nose, into our throat and down into our lungs, the brain goes, oh. And by focusing on the detail of your breath, your brain is no longer thinking about the things that it was worrying about a minute ago.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to note that the brain cannot stop thinking about something. It can only think about something else. So if I were to say for you, to you, for instance, I were to say, don't think of a white polar bear. Whatever you do, don't think of a white polar bear. You can think of anything but not a white polar bear. What do you notice?
The first thing that pops in my head is a white polar bear.
Right. So isn't that weird, right? I told you not to do something, but your brain has to do it first before it can then say, oh, don't do that. And the studies have also shown that if I were to do that a lot with you, the more you suppress the thought of the white polar bear, because I'm telling you not to think about it, the more the white polar bear will pop up in your mind later on this evening, or maybe tomorrow morning. So you might be in a conversation with family or friends later this evening, and you just suddenly think of a white polar bear.
Yeah.
And you go white. Now, it'll be interesting for you to notice if that's happening or not, but I haven't asked you to suppress it a lot, because in the studies, they asked people to suppress it for about 5 minutes, constantly suppressing the thought. Don't think about this. Don't think about that. And if you think about it, so much of our messaging is don't do this or don't do that. And it makes people do sometimes the very thing that they shouldn't be doing.
Yeah.
So instead, we need to be very clear about what we want people to do rather than what we don't want them to do. So when I'm feeling anxiety or stress, because that happens, something upsets me, I don't go like, oh, go away thought. I'll go, no, what do I need to think about here? I need to be grateful for the wonderful things in my life, my wonderful wife, my wonderful home, and just the little things that, I can go home and sleep at night in my own comfy bed. There are many people who can't do that. And by being really grateful, it can really help. Now, that's another thing that I've done recently, is started a gratitude journal.
Yeah.
Have you heard about this?
Oh, yes. It's quite therapeutic, and it's extremely beneficial. Yeah.
And I went on a program that was suggested we do it. So we did it for 30 days. And I just loved it so much that I now have a little notebook by my bed. And as I go to sleep, just before I close my eyes and put my head on the pillow, write down 5 things I'm grateful for, and at least one thing that I've learned today. And it really, back to growth mindset. What have I learned? What are the new things I'll be looking out for? What are the things I'm grateful for? And there's a lot of repetition in what I'm grateful for, but it's just good to acknowledge those things, especially before you go to bed. And the research is astounding for what they've now discovered about people who keep gratitude journals. How much healthy they are, how it reduces incidence of heart attack, it has boosts your immune system. I mean, real physical benefits.
I have a question for you, David. Is it our thoughts that result in some kind of a bodily response, or is the brain chemicals responsible for the way we feel and think? Or is it because of the anxiety we experience because of the circumstances or environment we're living in that creates the brain to release certain chemicals? Or is it
okay? Very good question. And so there's a lot of research going on into this, because is it the thought that creates certain feelings, or is it the feelings that create certain thoughts? And there's a model that you can think of that's useful from cognitive behavioral therapy. And it's a mod where you have a diagram of 3 items. So it's thoughts, feelings, and actions. And the thing is, the arrows go in both directions between all these 3 things. So it can be any point that creates a trigger point. It could be a thought that creates a feeling that then creates an action, or it could be an action that creates a thought that creates a feeling, or it could be an action that creates a feeling and then a thought. So it's completely interlinked. And that's what makes it so complex. But it's really useful to go, to separate myself out from my feelings and to be able to go, oh, I'm thinking this and I'm feeling this. And if I'm feeling uncomfortable, to be mindful about that, take the deep breaths, become aware of it, and label it. And I may have said this before in different conversations with you, but it's really useful to be able to label our feelings. Am I feeling frustrated, angry, upset, betrayed, let down? Yeah, there could be a feeling that's related to all those different things. But when I can label them, my brain goes, oh, you're feeling that. And that's appropriate to feel under these circumstances. Have a bit of self-compassion and say, what do you need to do about it? If the brain cannot label the feeling, it'll carry on looking through something in your brain called your amygdala, which is where a lot of emotional upsetting and threat responses are stored. It's like a memory center for storage of these things. It'll go there and it'll go, when did we last feel this? What does this feeling mean? And what's really interesting about that is that it often goes back to when we were very young and unresourceful, and something happened that upset us and we didn't know how to deal with it. So we threw a tantrum or bawled out crying or whatever, because we weren't resourceful, right? We were young and ineffective in dealing with the world. And therefore we can be propelled very quickly through an unlabeled memory of an anxious feeling. We can be propelled into a state of unresourcefulness. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But by labeling it, we can go, oh, I'm angry or upset or betrayed. What do I need to do about that as an adult? And the first thing I need to do is calm myself down by breathing a bit, then thinking about things that are useful and that I'm grateful for, and then say, okay, who can help me with this? Or who can I speak to about this? Because it's great. My wife and I have a great understanding that when one of us is upset, we'll say, look, I just need to talk. And because I'm a professional coach, I'll always need to say, is there anything you want me to do? And often she just goes, no, just listen. I go, okay. I don't need to do anything here. I just need to listen compassionately without judgment and not go, oh, you need to do this or you need to do that, or, and almost like try to fix her. Then it's much better. And one of the things we also say a lot is, you're allowed. Give permission to the feeling, because when you give permission to the feeling, we can relax a little bit. We're not fighting it. We're going, okay, it's there. I'm allowed to have this feeling. It's appropriate for what's going on. Now, what do I need to do to get resourceful and do something about it to change it?
Because there's a natural tendency to ignore your emotions and feelings. Some people avoid the defense mechanism of, denial, avoidance. Oh, let's not think about it. Let's not acknowledge it. Let's distract ourselves. And that doesn't help in healing. And what you were saying just now, David, reminded me of this really interesting study that I read, where it says that people who have experienced some form of trauma, even if it's as little as just driving in a car and having to just suddenly push brakes to avoid an accident, something as little as that, it has such a major impact on the chemistry of our brain. And sometimes traumatic experiences can even shrink the size of the amygdala. And I was just like amazed by that.
To shrink the size of it?
As in, it decreases the size. It's something that was shown in MRI scans,
right?
Of like two different groups of people, one who had experienced trauma, who were survivors or victims, and then the other group who did not experience any.
Right, and the ones who didn't experience it had a smaller one or larger
The
one?
ones who experienced trauma.
Had a smaller one. Okay, I haven't seen that research. That's really, really interesting, because it goes to show that the brain, we're still learning so much about the brain, and that the brain in many ways is like a muscle. So I regularly go to the gym now because I want to improve my fitness. And therefore, you do your weights or you do your running or whatever sort of fitness. And I'm becoming more muscular. My muscles are growing. And I'm thinking, great, that's really nice. And they've discovered that the brain has areas, not all of it, but has areas that the more you exercise it, through memory techniques or what other things, mindfulness and being well, grows different parts of the brain to be stronger. You get more dense clusters of brain cells. And one of the things that's really fascinating study that they've done is one with London taxi drivers. They had a study, they were doing brain scans on people, and a large population of the study group were taxi drivers, London cab drivers.
Yeah.
And one of the things that London cab drivers all have to do is the knowledge, which is a test that takes about 3 years to study, 3 years of study to learn all the street names of London and all the routes through London. You know, there's massive amounts of streets and huge amounts of memorizing. And they found that the part of our brain that is like the circuit network switchboard for memories, where everything comes in and then gets located to a certain point in your brain, it's called the hippocampus, that was larger in London taxi drivers than the rest of the population.
Wow.
And they discovered then and used this term called neuroplasticity, where they talk about the brain being plastic. It can grow or change shape. And in even follow-ups, and even more interesting is a follow-up study with retired taxi drivers. When they scanned their brains, their hippocampus had reduced back to the normal size of the normal population.
Wow.
So if you don't use it, you lose it, which is absolutely fascinating. It's really interesting. So I tell you, be interested in seeing more about that study.
It's just like a machine. If you don't use it, it will start to rust and waste away.
Yeah. And, you know, I've also read about a study where a young woman had a very serious brain tumor when she was very young, pre-puberty, I think five or seven, maybe even younger. And they removed a big chunk of her brain because there was a tumor around it. And they thought, well, what's going to happen to her? Is she going to be disabled? Will she ever walk, learn to read, write, and be a normal kid?
Yeah.
And something about the timing of that surgery and her brain being still very, very developmental, the brain just did a workaround. And she's a perfectly normal kid growing up the way normal kids grow up, but she's got a big chunk of her brain missing.
Wow.
Amazing. Fascinating. So with all of this, I invite your listeners and viewers to always think that their brain is much more capable and much more able to move beyond any current situation which may be causing discomfort, unpleasantness, or whatever. And, you know, okay, for serious situations where it's, you know, you have serious mental concerns or mental illness, then that's going to need specialist therapy and specialist help. But most of us actually have a very broad range of emotions that we go through, and that with some help around understanding, it's just your brain. It's just doing what brains do. And therefore, by using some thinking exercises and awareness of breathing, I always recommend mindfulness practice and meditation to people as well. For some people, that can be prayer, but for some people, it can just be being aware of their breathing, is to put some exercise and discipline into that. So when an emotion arises, you're more able to notice it and do something about it, rather than be triggered and tiddlywinked, like, you know, spun off into actions and behaviors that are purely driven by your emotions. And that's not a good thing.
I often hear from people that meditation, for example, it improves your consciousness, self-awareness. How does that work?
Okay, so I've been meditating now for a long time. I'm turning 60 next week, and I've been doing it since I was 16. So, you know, over 40 years, let's say. And every day, twice a day. And it is interesting to notice that I am able to label and notice my emotions a lot more and be able to go, okay, that's triggering me, it's stirring me up, I'm noticing I'm upset. What do I need to do about this, rather than get all upset about it? So I still feel upset, but then I can quickly go label it, name it and tame it, as I say, and then find a way to engage with it and do something about it.
How do you tame it? How does behavior change happen? Surely it wouldn't happen overnight.
So it's not necessarily easy. It's relatively simple, but it's not necessarily easy. And it's, first of all, you have to be able to label it. You have to be able to acknowledge, I'm upset. If you're in denial, like you said earlier, That's not going to go anywhere, right? That's going to cause a lot of problems.
Oh, yeah.
Because if you deny it with alcohol or deny it with, drugs or whatever other, pleasure-seeking habits to try and just change your state with something, that's not good. That might work in the short term, but it's not going to work in the long term, because that suppressed stuff will wreak havoc later. So I'm a great believer in feeling your feelings to the full, talking to someone about it, because when we speak and interact with another human being, like I'm doing now with you, I believe some really magical stuff happens between human brains, because by you responding to what I'm saying, and okay, we don't know each other very well, but with my wife, I know she loves and trusts me. She sees the good in me. She wants the best for me. So when I'm upset, her compassion and love are really helpful. They're really soothing, because they help me go, yeah, it's okay. Life is okay. Life is safe. I have resources. There's stuff I can do. So it's reminding ourselves of our resources, reminding ourselves of the good things in life that we can do. The one little thing that I can do today that's going to make my life a little bit better tomorrow. What can I do, and focus on that, what I can do, rather than all the things I cannot do.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah. So coming back to behavior change,
yeah.
You did mention that how your thoughts and recognizing your feelings is so important in changing your behavior. And you gave some wonderful examples of, instead of reacting, how you respond by acknowledging your own emotions and feelings. But if it's about habit, changing a habit, for example, and that habit shapes your behavior, your personality, how can you change that? Especially if it's been there for like decades.
Right. It's about tiny micro changes. So you don't try and change everything overnight. So for example, if it's a food issue, rather than say, okay, I'm going to go on this really strict diet, is just change one or two things in your diet and get used to changing one or two things. So I've heard, as an example, I'm not saying that people should do this, but for someone who wants to become a vegan, i.e. no animal bits whatsoever in any of their food, the first thing they might do is say, okay, I'm not going to eat anything with 4 legs. So cut out, all the animals that have 4 legs, and don't eat anything with 4 legs. And then cut out the animals with 2 legs. And then cut out, don't say nothing with legs. So now we're only eating fish, right? And so now nothing that swims. Okay. Then what else is left? So it's about
that doesn't have a shadow.
Right. So, but it's slowly, slowly having a change that is incremental and focused on what you want to do, rather than focusing on not doing the thing you don't want to do, because we know from our example with the polar bears, that doesn't help. It's no good saying, I'm not going to do this thing. I'm not going to do this thing, because that's only making you focus on it. It's much better to say, no, I want to do this thing instead. I want to do this thing instead. So a part of it is about building a habit into something that you already are doing. So for example, I wanted to start running, and I don't really enjoy running. But I know it's good for my fitness to get my heartbeat up, and that's overall reduced my resting heartbeat. And I'm interested in it, so I've got a little, I can monitor my heartbeat. And now I get up in the morning, I've laid out my running shoes, I've laid out my running kit, and I've even bought a little rain jacket, so if it's raining, so that's not going to deter me. And then I just run for 10 minutes. There's sort of a little block I can run around in my area where I live. And it's got a bit of an incline in one bit, and then it flattens out a bit. And, I really get my heart going. I just jog gently, not too hard, not too, just enough to get me puffing and panting. Halfway through, I walk for a little bit just to get my breath back. But I notice like my heart goes up to 160, 170 beats per minute. That's pretty intense. And just 10 minutes. And I just do that. And I don't think about doing it. I just do it. I don't go, oh, should I go for a run this morning? No, I just go for the run. And should I really go outside? Will it be? No, just go for the run. Just do the action, right? Don't think about doing the action. Just put on your shoes, put on your running kit, go out the door, make sure you got your keys, and start the run. and then think about anything you want, but don't think about the run or not. Just get into it and just do it. So take that first step, and then usually something else happens. At the moment, another thing that I'm doing, which is really interesting, is I've heard that cold showers are really healthy.
Yeah.
Have you heard about this?
Yeah, I've seen people, I wouldn't say a bucket of ice, but it's like a pool full of icy cold water, and they just go for a dip, and it tends to kind of kickstart their blood circulation, something like that. Yeah. Exactly.
It seems to really boost your immune system. What I've read is they don't quite know why, but it's something to do with the shock of it, that your body goes, oh, need to, get everything ready for a shocking system, for, to be able to boost everything so that we can deal with this cold.
Yeah.
But there's nothing more ghastly for me in my mind than a cold shower. I cannot really, the thought of it just makes me, it's just horrific, right?
Yeah.
So I thought, how am I going to start doing this? And what I'm doing now, when I have a shower every day, is at the end of the shower, I put on the cold tap full and switch off the hot tap and just put my head under the cold tap, just my head. And I've done that until that feels, instead of being horrific and horrible, it's feeling refreshing. So I'm noticing and feeling, oh, that's quite refreshing, rather than, I'm going to die. It's like horrible. And now what I'm doing is I'm putting it onto my shoulders and arms, on the cold shower and shoulders and arms. And I'm going to do that until, that's refreshing. And then I'll start doing my legs maybe. And then I'll finish off with my torso, because it's the bit I'm most uneager to do. But it's fascinating to see how I'm shifting from something that's horrific to something that's refreshing.
So you're taking small steps, they're realistic, and you're consistent. That's another thing. Lots of people may not be able to be, regular or consistent. Maybe they'll get motivated for a day or two, and then they'll lose that motivation. So how do you maintain that?
By having the vision of what's good for me. It's the health that I'm interested in. It's beyond the cold shower. It's the health I'm interested in. It's the health I'm interested in because my goal is to live to 104, because then my wife and I, to be happy and healthy at 104, because we'll then be able to celebrate our 75th wedding anniversary. We married quite late. And we just have that as a goal, right? It's a fun thing to have. But if I'm 60, right, then I've still got another 44 years to go. So I need to look after this body that I have. And part of that means going to fit. I went to the gym this morning and being fit.
Yeah.
And sometimes feeling uncomfortable about that. But it's just, the overriding motivation is I want to live a long time and I want to be happy and healthy. And therefore I'm going to, my body, don't worry about a bit of discomfort. A bit of discomfort is nothing compared to the comfort and joy of living a longer time and spending more time with my wife.
And that's your ultimate goal. And hence you're taking small, realistic steps so that you can achieve that. And that's the advice you would give to our viewers as well.
Yeah, and I'm tapping in back to the brain chemistry. I'm tapping into a very particular chemical in your brain, and it's called dopamine. And it's a really interesting chemical because what it does is it gives you great energy to do something because of the anticipation of a reward. So the reward that I'm, dangling in front of myself is health and a long life, being happy and healthy and being able to travel the world and do nice things for a long time. And that creates a chemical in my brain which says, okay, what do we need to prioritize here? Okay, what actions do we need to take? And gives me the energy to do the things that I want to do. So it's like unlocking the chemistry of my brain to motivate and move my behavior in the direction that I want to do it or have it move. Does that make sense?
I'm just thinking, what about those people who do start with this enthusiasm and motivation and have this goal in mind, but then they have certain days where they're like, you know what, it's okay if I just miss on one day and, have cheat days.
Okay. One day is okay. But get back on the wagon the next day. Don't do 2 days. 2 days is unacceptable. So over the holiday festival period, I knew I had a couple of days, so I didn't go for my morning run. And that's okay. But, I'm back on track now.
Yeah.
So it's okay not to do something once or twice. But the thing is that they're the anomaly rather than the rule. Once you slip into not doing it for 3 or 4 or 5 times, then you lose the habit and you've almost got to crank it all up again. And again, the interest, because I love experimenting with this stuff myself, so therefore I'm giving you those examples around what I'm doing in experimenting, is always be exploring how to step out of your comfort zone. Whenever you notice a comfort zone, learn to step out of it. It's just good practice to do that. If we keep ourselves stuck in our comfort zones, we also begin to form beliefs about the world, about the way people are, and that then inhibits our behavior. And we these days tend then to surround ourselves with people who believe the same thing. Oh, isn't it terrible about this? Isn't it terrible about that? Oh yeah, it's really bad. Yeah. Rather than seeking out opposing points of view to challenge your thinking, go like, okay, what do I really need to know here? How do I really need to behave here? What's appropriate here? And be willing to have that sense of exploration and growth and curiosity. I love curiosity. Does that make sense? Oh, I can't hear you. You've muted.
Sorry.
Yeah.
And that's going to help with not only breaking old habits, but also informing new ones.
Oh, absolutely. Especially informing new ones, because unless you cannot break an old habit without forming a new one. You need to focus on forming a new habit. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So if anybody wants to change their behavior, they first need to think about the behavior that they want, and then focus on that, which allows the other behavior to fade, become less intense, to become less, not so many hooks in you, if you know what I mean, so that you can. So one of the things that's really useful if you're going to develop a new habit is to use some of the techniques in a great book, which I highly recommend to everyone. It's called Atomic Habits. It's by an author called James Clear. And he's a very interesting guy, very, very good author. He really writes well. And Atomic Habits is back to this thing I said earlier about tiny bits, right? What are the tiny incremental changes that you can make in order to shift your behavior? Because if we try to do too much too soon, it's just not going to work. It's going to become daunting or difficult, and then we're going to stop. But if we do something that the first rule is to make it obvious that you need to do this thing. So I start laying out my running shoes before I go to bed. I'll have my running shoes, my shorts, and if I know it's going to be cold the next day, I'll make sure that I've got a proper fleece or whatever I need. And if it's raining, I'll have my raincoat handy, my little rain jacket. So everything's ready. I don't need to think about it. I don't need to go, oh, maybe by the time I go looking for my rain jacket, and where is it? And oh God, now I feel, sure, I won't go for a run. I just no excuse. Yeah, make it obvious that needs to happen. And it's useful, therefore, if you want to have something be obvious, when it comes to a new habit, is often link the new habit to something that you already do.
Right.
So, for example, if you want to have a new way of thinking about something and being grateful, for example, you might go, well, I brush my teeth every evening. So while I'm brushing my teeth, I'm going to remember to be grateful for stuff. Because then you link something that you want to do to something you're already doing. It's already a habit. So you can build. That's one way of doing it. And another thing then to consider is to make it attractive, make it something that's nice to do. So I made sure that I went out and bought, even though I haven't had to run in the rain yet, I went out and bought a nice little light jacket that I knew was comfortable and I was happy with, because I wanted to have no excuse for if it rained. And you can, it's just about making it somehow something that you look at the bright side of why you want to do it. For me, the cold showers, it's like, how do you make that attractive? Well, do a tiny bit, only my head, and then just be curious about how it feels, and feel this, be more mindful of the sensation of the cold on my head than what I'm thinking about it. So I'm being super curious and wondering, oh, what's it going to feel like today? And then feeling that feeling and not labeling it as full of dread or full of discomfort, but more as like, oh, that's actually refreshing and tingling on my skin. So make it obvious, make it attractive. and make it easy. And again, with the running, I make it easy because I do something that it's all laid out and I don't need to do any thinking about it. So try and make it as easy as possible. I had a colleague who wants to learn, practice more music. In fact, my wife plays music as well. So to make that easy, she leaves the saxophone out. My colleague leaves his guitar out. Rather than putting it away, he leaves it out. It's there. It's on a stand, easy to pick up and easy to go for. And ultimately make it satisfying. Make it so that there's some sort of reward for it, and be that a reward for. So, for example, when I've one of the things I used to have a massage once a month, and I said, no, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run for a month, and then I'm going to give myself a massage as a reward. So I know that every run is getting me closer to my little reward of a massage. So there's some link to something pleasurable on the consistency of doing the thing that you're wanting to do.
Something to look out for, something to kind of, it's like you're rewarding yourself, you're giving yourself positive reinforcement, and that's going to motivate you and keep you going.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So what little steps can we take? If you could share with us some useful tools, techniques that we can apply in our daily life to form maybe new habits or break old ones.
Okay, so breaking the old ones is back to finding a new habit that will replace the old one, or finding a new habit that will become more important and more motivating in order to allow the old habit to no longer have the power over you that it used to have. Does that make sense? So without any specific examples, it's difficult because everything has its own little caveats and its own little nuances. But the general rule is the 1% rule. So one of the things you can think about is the 1% rule. What can you do that will put you 1% closer to your new habit today, that you'll be 1% closer tomorrow? And what can you do tomorrow that will have you be 1% closer the following day? So it's make it tiny increments. If you want to read more, start by saying, okay, I'm going to read for 5 minutes a day. If you want to exercise more, start with 5 minutes of exercise. When people ask me about, oh, how do you start meditation? Because at the moment, my regime is 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the evening. I go, I don't have the time for that. I go, meditate for 1 minute.
Wow.
Put your watch on for 1 minute timer and just sit and breathe for 1 minute. It'll be over in a flash. And don't tell me you don't have 1 minute, because everyone has 1 minute.
Yeah.
And then make that 2 minutes, and then make it 3 minutes, and then maybe stick with 5 minutes for a month or 2 months, and then make it up to 10 minutes, and then find whatever you feel is a good time for you, and notice what's happening. Notice what you're noticing. So do you have any examples of a habit that you'd like to create?
There's so many things I have started doing since COVID started that I never used to do before.
Right.
Talking about example, for example, doing this online. Similarly, the trainings that I used to deliver, I used to do it in a hall or a conference room, human interaction. But because of circumstances, I don't have choice. So shifting it to online, sitting in front of a computer and literally looking in the camera and speaking, something I've never done before. I wasn't really comfortable in doing it. But doing it for 5 minutes, speaking with a friend or a work colleague, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And before I knew it, I was doing it for like 2 hours, 3 hours.
Yeah, exactly that. So that you actually, and that's again, back to all the stuff we were saying earlier about understanding your brain chemicals and understanding building new positive habits, stepping out of your comfort zone, but not too much too soon. Do a little bits and grow with consistency. You mentioned consistency as well, because the real benefit of building a new habit is exactly those things that you said. Clear goal. So you got your dopamine going because you want the reward, and make it easy so that it becomes something that you can easily do. Start small and build consistency.